someone cultivate a mature magician energy without falling into intellectual arrogance or spiritual bypassing?
That last one's a very important one because that also has to do with a defense. If I have a problem, but then I move to a sort of superficial spiritual solution, again as a defense, so I don't have to actually deal with it. You'll see a lot of this related to what we were talking about last week with the warrior archetype. There are a lot of people who become peace loving as a way of avoiding developing their aggression. And speaking of myself, of course, first, and I've seen it in many, many people, because it's just easier to become a spiritual type and to think you're really on the high moral ground. But what you missed is the ability to set boundaries, the ability to be fierce when you need to be fierce, the ability to advocate, the ability to protect those who are vulnerable. You miss developing all those things in a kind of spiritual bypass. And there's often a good bit of narcissism attached with it as well. I'm sort of superior to all you other people who do this, and I just, above all that. I'm all for spiritual connection and development. And in fact, I would go so far as to say getting these archetypes regulated is a necessary step to actually connecting with the deepest parts of ourselves where we can actually legitimately affect that. But one very, very helpful thing is to learn about these archetypes. Because if you know that your job is to mediate the archetype, not become the archetype, that's a very helpful piece of information because it helps you with inflation, first of all. So if you can acknowledge that you are in service in a particular function, let's say you're a workshop leader, and one route to go down would be convincing yourself that you're just the best workshop leader in the world. And you're kind of not Jesus, but you're certainly here to save a good bit of the world. Well, obviously, that's generally going to be pretty big inflation. Whereas if you realize, no, my job is to help mediate this energy that has to do with initiation so I can help people transition through these developmental processes. That's a very, very, very different frame. And it helps keep you grounded and it helps keep you um, from as much as you can from becoming inflated. So part of the purpose of ritual, and I would go so far as to even say, and this is where I get into trouble with most people because they misunderstand me, but even where some of the dogma of a particular container can be very helpful so you don't get inflated. Because the magician sits opposite the sovereign, which we have not talked about yet, but we will. The sovereign, everybody is generally in awe of the sovereign energy. And so the kings and the queens get all the accolades, whereas they're often not particularly connected to magician material, so they're often not full of wisdom. They're not often full of knowledge. So here's the magician over here, who's usually the lone character that lives off at the edge of the kingdom. So there's a secret power drive. It's unconscious and hidden, but very frequently what happens is people go into magician vocations, and once they become successful in that vocation, they flip into the shadow side of the sovereign because of this hidden power drive. So if you're aware that there is an archetype of the magician and that you're supposed to be, if you're practicing a magician vocation, you're supposed to be in service to that archetype or embodying and mediating that archetype to whatever your group is you're working with.